William Harper adjusted his tie and glanced at his reflection in the polished glass of the departure gate. The reflection, looking back at him, was that of a man who had lived a full life. Grey hair combed neatly, a pressed dark suit, and a small bouquet of white lilies resting in his hands. At 78, William was no stranger to airports, but today felt different. He wasn't just traveling, he was on a mission. His daughter, Rebecca Harper, had recently earned her place as captain at Skylark Airlines. Today marked her first flight in command, and William was determined to surprise her. The thought of seeing her pride and joy light up at the sight of him made his heart swell. Dallas International Airport was bustling with its usual rhythm. Travelers pulling rolling suitcases, families saying their goodbyes, and announcements crackling overhead. But William moved with purpose, his cane tapping softly on the gleaming floor as he approached the gate. "Good afternoon, sir," said the attendant at the counter, her smile warm as she scanned his first-class ticket. "Enjoy your flight." "Thank you," William replied, tipping his hat politely. His voice, though soft, carried a quiet authority that turned heads. Boarding the plane, William marveled at the first-class cabin. The leather seats gleamed under soft ambient lighting, and a faint scent of lavender hung in the air. It was a far cry from the coach flights he was used to in his younger days. "Good afternoon, sir," chirped a young flight attendant named Sarah. Her welcoming demeanor instantly put William at ease. "Can I help you with your bag or offer you anything before takeoff?" "A little water would be lovely, thank you," William said, settling into his seat by the window. Sarah returned moments later, handing him a chilled bottle with a genuine smile. As William sipped, he glanced at the other passengers, professionals tapping away on laptops, a young couple whispering excitedly, and a family with a toddler who waved enthusiastically at him. He waved back, a small smile tugging at his lips. For a moment, everything felt perfect. William let his thoughts drift to Rebecca, imagining her standing tall in her captain's uniform, her voice calm and confident as she addressed the crew. He could almost hear her. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." But as William leaned back in his seat, savoring the thought, a shadow passed over him. It was Alex, another flight attendant, tall and broad-shouldered, with an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. His sharp gaze swept over William, lingering for just a moment too long. There was something unsettling in his expression, a flicker of disdain that was subtle but undeniable. "Can I help you?" Alex asked, his tone clipped. "No, thank you. I'm all set," William replied, maintaining his composure. Alex gave a tight nod before moving on, his demeanor toward the other passengers noticeably warmer. William watched him walk away, a faint unease settling in the pit of his stomach. But William wasn't the type to let small slights bother him. He brushed it off, focusing instead on the excitement of the journey ahead. Or so he thought. What William didn't know was that this flight would test not only his patience, but also his dignity in ways he could never have anticipated. And the moment of reckoning was only a few hours away. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane ascended, the faint hum of the engines filling the air. William Harper adjusted the blanket Sarah had kindly brought him and gazed out of the window. The sprawling city lights below gradually gave way to darkness, and he allowed himself a brief smile, imagining the pride on Rebecca's face when he surprised her after landing. But as the flight settled into its routine, the unsettling presence of Alex returned. This time, it wasn't subtle. Sarah passed by frequently, ensuring every passenger in first class felt pampered. She offered snacks, adjusted blankets, and responded to requests with genuine warmth. William couldn't help but notice how different her demeanor was from Alex's. When Alex approached William, his interactions carried an air of disdain. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. A tight-lipped tone, a flicker of impatience, a refusal to meet William's eyes. "Would you like a drink, sir?" Alex asked, standing stiffly by William's seat. "Just a bit of tea, thank you," William replied with his usual politeness. Alex nodded curtly, disappearing down the aisle. When he returned, he handed the cup to William with an almost exaggerated carelessness. A few drops of hot tea sloshed over the rim and onto William's hand. "Careful," Alex said, the corner of his mouth twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile. William didn't flinch, even as the sting of the hot liquid met his skin. Instead, He dabbed at his hand with his handkerchief, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Thank you," he said simply, though his voice carried a weight that made Alex pause before walking away. The tension in the cabin began to mount. The other first-class passengers, though discreet, were starting to notice. A young woman sitting diagonally across from William furrowed her brow, her gaze flickering between Alex and the elderly man. A businessman beside her shook his head subtly, as if to say, "This isn't right." But no one said a word. Have you ever witnessed something unfair and stayed silent? What would you do if you were on this flight? Tell me in the comments. The meal service began, and Sarah was the first to reach William. "Would you like the chicken or the vegetarian pasta, sir?" she asked, her tone soft and respectful. "The pasta sounds wonderful," William replied. She placed the tray in front of him with care, her kindness a stark contrast to Alex's cold demeanor. But Sarah barely had time to move to the next passenger when Alex appeared again, his towering presence casting a shadow over William's seat. "You sure you can handle that?" Alex asked, his voice low but condescending. He gestured vaguely at William's trembling hands, a subtle mockery that made William's jaw tighten. "I'll manage just fine, thank you," William replied evenly, his eyes meeting Alex's with quiet strength. Alex smirked and leaned in slightly, as if to grab the tray under the pretense of adjusting it. But in one swift motion, he tipped it forward, sending the steaming pasta tumbling onto William's lap. The hot sauce stained William's crisp suit, and the heat of the dish made him wince. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin, and for a moment, even Alex looked surprised at the spectacle he'd caused. "Oh dear," Alex said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I guess my hand slipped." Sarah rushed over immediately, her face flushed with worry. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harper," she said, quickly grabbing napkins. She shot Alex a sharp look, her frustration barely concealed. "Don't worry," William said softly, his voice steady despite the indignity. "I've dealt with worse." He dabbed at his suit with the napkin Sarah provided, but the sauce had already seeped into the fabric. The atmosphere in the cabin grew heavier. Passengers exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others angry. But still, no one spoke up. William's thoughts drifted to Rebecca. What would she think if she saw him now? Her father, humiliated in front of strangers. But William had always taught his daughter to rise above anger, to let dignity guide her actions, and so he sat there, calm and composed, even as his stained suit clung uncomfortably to his skin, or so it seemed. Because beneath his calm exterior, a slow anger was building, one that would soon find its voice. The events of the flight were far from over. What Alex and the others didn't know was that William's quiet strength was more powerful than their ridicule, and waiting at the gate was someone who would ensure justice was served. Keep listening, because the next turn of events is nothing short of jaw-dropping. The plane rolled to a stop at the gate, and the usual rustle of passengers preparing to disembark filled the cabin. William Harper remained seated, his hands resting on the armrests as he took a deep breath. He adjusted his stained suit jacket, determined to carry himself with the same quiet dignity he always had. Despite the events of the flight, as the first-class passengers filed out, some glanced at him sympathetically, while others avoided his gaze entirely. William slowly stood, gathered his belongings, and made his way toward the exit. Alex stood at the doorway, his expression smug as he offered a disingenuous farewell. "Have a good day, sir," Alex said, barely glancing at him. But just as William stepped into the jet bridge, he heard a familiar voice. "Dad?" Rebecca Harper stood at the end of the bridge in her crisp Skylark Airlines captain's uniform, her presence commanding and her face bright with pride, until her eyes fell on him. The joy in her expression quickly turned to concern as she took in the stained lapel of his suit and the tired lines around his eyes. "What happened?" Rebecca asked, her voice low but sharp. "It's nothing, Rebecca," William replied, his tone calm as always. "Let's not make a fuss." Rebecca wasn't convinced. She knew her father's quiet strength well, but she could also sense when something wasn't right. Her gaze flickered past him to the plane where Alex and Sarah were now stepping out. Rebecca's sharp eyes immediately locked onto Alex. His confident posture faltered, and his smirk faded as he realized who William was and who Rebecca was. "You were on this flight?" Rebecca asked Alex, her tone cutting through the noise of the bustling terminal. "Yes, Captain Harper," Alex replied, his voice uncertain. "And you served this passenger, my father?" Alex hesitated, his face pale. I didn't know he was your father," he stammered. The confrontation at the airline office quickly led to decisive action. Rebecca and William sat across from Skylark Airlines' senior supervisor, Mr. Franklin, recounting the events. Rebecca's tone was firm and unwavering, while William spoke with quiet authority, his words carrying undeniable weight. "Respect isn't optional," William said. "It's a foundation, and without it, trust crumbles." Mr. Franklin agreed. Alex was suspended immediately pending an investigation, and Rebecca pressed for deeper changes. "This isn't just about one flight," she said. "It's about setting a standard for how every passenger is treated." In a follow-up meeting with the airline's CEO, Skylark committed to a company-wide overhaul. A new training program focusing on empathy and respect would be mandatory for all staff, while first-class service protocols would undergo a complete review. Alex faced formal dismissal, and Sarah was recognized for her professionalism during the incident. As Rebecca and William left the office, she turned to her father. "Do you think this will make a difference?" "It already has," William replied. "Every change starts with someone willing to speak up. Today, that was us." The changes Rebecca and William set in motion would ripple far beyond one flight, proving that standing up for what's right can transform not just policies but people. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "So if you had known, you'd have treated him differently?" "Let me be very clear. Every passenger, no matter who they are, deserves respect. What happened here is unacceptable." Sarah, standing nearby, looked uneasy. "Captain Harper, Rebecca raised a hand to stop her. "I saw how you tried to help. This isn't about you." Her gaze turned back to Alex, her voice dropping to a steely tone. "You, however, have a lot to answer for." Rebecca didn't waste time. She quickly escorted her father, Alex, and Sarah to Skylark Airlines' supervisor's office. Once inside, she demanded an immediate meeting with management. William sat quietly as Rebecca recounted the events with calm precision, her voice clear and unwavering. When she finished, she turned to her father. "Would you like to add anything?" she asked gently. William nodded, his tone measured but firm. "I've seen a lot in my years. I've been treated with kindness, and I've been treated with contempt. But what happened on that flight wasn't just bad service, it was a lack of basic respect. That's not something any company can afford to ignore." The room fell silent. Even Alex, who had initially tried to downplay the situation, was now visibly uncomfortable. The supervisor, Mr. Franklin, leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mr. Harper, Captain Harper, I want to assure you that this will be addressed," Mr. Franklin said. "Alex, your behavior is unacceptable. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation. Sarah, thank you for your professionalism under difficult circumstances." Rebecca gave a small nod of acknowledgement, but wasn't entirely satisfied. "Suspension is a start," she said, her tone firm. "But Skylark Airlines has a responsibility to ensure this never happens again, not just for my father, but for every passenger who steps onto your planes." Mr. Franklin nodded gravely. "Understood. We will begin a full review of our training and service standards immediately. Rest assured, changes will be made." As they left the office, Rebecca turned to her father. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Dad. I'll make sure this is handled." William smiled softly, his pride for his daughter shining through. "You've already handled it, Rebecca. The important thing is that you stood up for what's right. That's all that matters." Rebecca placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice quieter now. "And I learned that from you." The confrontation had set justice in motion, but this was just the beginning. Rebecca's actions would spark a ripple effect throughout Skylark Airlines, proving that standing up for what's right can lead to meaningful change. Weeks had passed since the flight that tested William Harper's patience and dignity. Skylark Airlines had made good on its promises, implementing mandatory empathy training for all staff and overhauling its service protocols. The ripple effect of Rebecca and William's actions was beginning to reshape the airline's culture, one small step at a time. William sat in his living room, the sunlight streaming through the window as he read a letter from Skylark Airlines. It was a personal note from the CEO, Miss Langston, thanking him for his courage and explaining the progress the company had made since their meeting. Along with the letter was an invitation to join a newly formed passenger advocacy council, ensuring that voices like William's would continue to shape the company's future. When Rebecca arrived later that day, she found her father holding the letter, a small but proud smile on his face. She sat beside him, noticing the sparkle in his eyes. "What's on your mind, Dad?" she asked. William handed her the letter. "It's not just about one flight, Rebecca. It's about the message we send. Sometimes, standing up for what's right doesn't just change a moment, it changes the future." Rebecca nodded, her respect for her father deepening even further. "And you taught me that," she said softly. "Every time I take that captain's seat, I'll carry this lesson with me." As father and daughter sat together, the tension of the past weeks gave way to a sense of accomplishment. They knew there was still work to be done, but their actions had already sparked change. And as William gazed out the window at the blue sky, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. Hope that the world could become a kinder, fairer place, one step at a time. This isn't just a story about one man or one flight. It's a reminder that dignity and respect should never be optional. So, what about you? Have you ever stood up for what's right, even when it was hard? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you for listening to this tale of resilience and justice. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Elderly Wisdom for more inspiring stories like this. Let's keep the conversation going. And remember, every act of kindness starts with someone like you.